Hi there, I'm Steve.
And I'm Brad, and we're going to show you how to install this base molding.
Today's application, we're using 5 1/4 inch tall molding, and it comes in 8-foot length.
Now the tools you can need for this install are
Caulk gun, caulk, tape measure, stud finder, white glue. We're going to use Framerica's own corner weld, and a nail gun.
So the first step of installing base molding is choosing a corner to start in. I suggest an inside corner.
Just like this corner. $60 1/4.
Before we apply those measurements to the molding, we first want to miter one edge because we're starting in a corner, and our corners are 90-degree angles, so it's two 45-degree angles. So if we miter the edge, we can rest in the corner and it'll connect seamlessly.
Now that our edge is mitered, we're going to apply the measurements. We're going to turn it upside down. We had 60 inches and a quarter. We're going to mark that on the back. Transfer that to the front. And we're going to angle it at 45 and cut it there. Now both edges are mitered and we have a leftover piece, we can use that for the return. But first let's do a dry fit to make sure the length is correct. Let's do a dry fit. Looks good, all except we have to make a return to fill in the gap.
So we're now going to use the scrap piece to make the return to fill the gap between where the molding and the front of the steps meet.
As you can see, we have an inside miter cut right now from the scrap piece. We need to make an outside miter cut. We're going to do that now.
So now that we have our spare piece edge mitered, so it'll book match the outside return gap, we're going to mark it for a straight cut.
We already had the 45 cut. Now we're going to do a 90-degree cut to the back of the miter. Cut that, and we're going to glue that into the piece.
So now that we have the pieces prepped and cut, we're going to glue them together.
A little piece. We're going to throw some glue on there. Right to the corner. Now we're going to let it dry.
So now we have our long base molding cut and ready for install. We are not going to install just yet. First we're going to get to the smaller wall and we're going to install that piece. Reason being, smaller pieces are a lot harder to work with because they're so much more rigid. Longer pieces, like this one,
can spring into place. Now that the dry fit looks good on the long wall, we're going to measure for the short wall. To get a true measurement, we're going to measure from above the molding to get the true corner. 7 3/4.
Before we apply those measurements to this piece, we're going to cut the inside miter so we get a true line of measurement.
Now we have our inside miter cut, we're going to apply the measurements. Do 7 3/4. And we're going to cut that square so it'll butt up to the door trim. Now that our piece is cut, you can see we have the inside miter cut and the straight cut. That's going to butt up against the door molding. Now let's install. There's always a stud in the corner and a stud next to the door jamb. So we're just going to install it. And there's no need for a stud finder as long as I shoot right in the corners. And we look good. Now that our short piece is in, we can install the long piece. It should slide right into place. I'm using a stud finder to find the studs. Put it on the ground to keep my stud in form. Always have one in the corner. And we always have a solid piece under the stairs. Looks good. As you install the molding, you may get some gaps. As you can see, we have one here. We're going to use the caulk to fill in the gap, put a nice bead, and use our finger to smooth it out.
So you can see our base molding install is complete. Our corners are all mitered, book matching seamlessly. It looks really nice.
Lucky for us, there was all 90-degree angles, but you might need an angle gauge to make sure the angles are correct.
Happy install, everyone.